In today's lesson, we're going to learn how, once we have proved two triangles congruent, how we can use that to say that corresponding parts of those triangles are congruent. So we have a little acronym here, and we call it CPCTC. All right, and I'm going to write over here what that stands for. That stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, so what it says here is, by the definition of congruent triangles, if you know two triangles are congruent, then you know that every pair of corresponding parts is also congruent. When you use this knowledge in a proof, we abbreviate it as CPCTC. All right, sometimes you will see people, instead of using CPCTC in their proof, they'll just write definition of congruent triangles, and that's perfectly fine too, but I have always used corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, and so we'll keep doing that in this class. So let's just see how that works. We got a proof here, we got statements, got our reasons, and let's see what we know. We know that SD, so that's this side here, SD is congruent to TC. Here's TC, and that's given. And also given to us is the fact that CS is congruent to DT. I'm going to mark those with a different color. CS is congruent to DT. So what am I trying to prove here? I'm going to mark these angles that I'm trying to prove are congruent in red. Angle SCT, so that would be this angle right here. I'm trying to show that that's congruent to angle TDS. So that looks like that one right there. So what it appears to me is that I need to show that this triangle right here, triangle CST, is congruent. Let me write this down. What do we need to show in order to have those angles be corresponding parts of congruent triangles? We need to show that triangle CST is congruent to triangle DTS. That's what I think our mission is. So that should probably be my next to last step in my proof. So let's just keep that in the back of our heads. All right then, so I'm really pretty close. I'm really pretty close to showing that those two triangles are congruent because I already have two sets of corresponding sides given. So we can't use the angles there that I've marked because that's what I'm trying to prove. So I really think the only thing I can do here is to try to get a third side. And that's easy because they share that third side. So what I'm going to do is, in triangle CST, I've got side ST, and it's going to be congruent to side TS in triangle DTS. All right, and I know that's true. That's really just saying that side is congruent to itself, but since order matters, I have to put it in that order, and I can do that. I can say that is true by the symmetric property of congruence. All right, so now I have those two triangles just like I wanted. Triangle CST is congruent to triangle DTS by the side congruence postulate. And now that I've got those triangles congruent, I can say that angle SCT is congruent to angle TDS because those are corresponding parts of congruent triangles and they're congruent. So that's all I got to do right there. When I'm trying to prove that parts of two triangles are congruent, I need to prove the triangles are congruent first and then use CPCTC. All right, let's do another one. That's really all I have in this lesson here, is a few proofs for us to do. I'm going to do 3 of them with you now, and then I'm going to save one for us to do as our warm-up in the next class. So let's write down our given statements. WYX is congruent to angle ZXY, and those are already marked. If they weren't marked, I would definitely want to mark them in my drawings. And I'm also given that angle WXY is congruent to angle ZYX. All that is given. Okay, so this looks pretty simple. All I got to do right here is take this side right here, say it's congruent to itself, and then I can use angle side angle, right, to show that those two triangles are congruent. But remember, since order matters, if I look at this triangle, let me do it in green, if I look at this triangle as WYX, so I'm just going to write that here, triangle WYX. Probably what I need to show is that that is congruent to triangle, let's see, W to Y, that would be ZXY. And if you look at the way these two letters are arranged, then once again, I'm going to have to use the symmetric property instead of the reflexive property. And I'm going to have to say YX is congruent to XY by the symmetric property of congruence. And now I have those two triangles are congruent. Triangle WYX is congruent. Sorry for the interruption. Triangle WYX is congruent to triangle ZXY. And we know that's by side angle side congruence postulate. And now that I have my triangles congruent, I can say, hopefully, we'll check it out and make sure, that WX is congruent to ZY. These have to be corresponding parts or I am not able to say they're congruent. So let's look and make sure. WX, that's this side of the green triangle, and we want to say that's congruent to ZY, and those absolutely are corresponding parts. So all we got to say here for our reason is CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, one more proof I'll do for you, and then we'll save the other one. I'm going to pause right here and write down the given information just to save a little bit of time. So you do that too, and then we'll come back together. Okay, here we go. So the first time I did this proof last night, this happens to be a proof that can be worked out in several ways. The first time I did this, I went from this given information straight into saying that angle, I said angle GMJ, which is this one right here, is congruent to angle HMJ, and that would be because of the right angles theorem. And then I went ahead and I ended up proving that the top two little triangles are congruent, and I used that information to prove that the bottom two little triangles are congruent. But then I realized there's a much quicker way to do this, and I can do it without even having to use all this given information. So I'm going to show you the short way, and if you're interested in seeing that long way that I did it, I'll certainly show it to you in class. But if you look here, already I have that this is congruent to this, angle 1 congruent to angle 2. So all I really got to do here, guys, right, is I got to say this side here is congruent to itself, right? And then I can say, and watch this, I'll draw this over this with red also. So if I do that, if I come in here now and say FJ is congruent to FJ, then can I not say that triangle GFJ is congruent to triangle HFJ? Certainly looks that way to me. So let's come on in here and do it and make sure it works. If I say FJ is congruent to FJ, and that of course is by the reflexive property of congruence, then I can say triangle GFJ is congruent to triangle HFJ by side angle side, right? I've got a side, I've got the included angle, and I've got a side. So side angle side, congruence postulate. And then the two angles I'm trying to prove are congruent, GJM. GJM is this one right here, and HJM, this one right here. They're just corresponding parts of those two triangles. So I'm just going to put that right in here in my proof. Angle GJM is congruent to angle HJM, CPCTC. And there you go. I didn't even have to use those right angles and the fact that they're congruent to prove both of the little sets of triangles are congruent. That was my first thought. But so every once in a while, guys, you will be able to find a quicker method to get to what you're trying to prove than to, I mean, it's rare, but it is possible. So that's, I mean, please let me know if anybody sees anything wrong with doing this proof this way. I certainly don't, but I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts on it if you did it another way. All right, and finally, here's the last proof. And once again, when I originally did this, it took me 9 steps, and I split the given up into 2 parts. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause here. I'm going to write down my first 3 steps, and then I'm going to save this for you to give it a try and see if you can come up with the proof. So I'll be right back. Alrighty, so there are my first 3 steps. Steps 1 and 3 are just the given, and then I went ahead and I said in step 2 that all those right angles that were given to me are congruent. And of course the reason I know that is by the right angles theorem that says all right angles are congruent. So if you have time tonight, go ahead and see if you can finish that proof, and then we will go over it at the beginning of class tomorrow. So don't let me forget. Write your summary, write your essential question, and we'll see you next time.